Welcome everyone to another tarot deck review here at This Magic House. I'm Becca. Thanks for joining me today. Today we have the Women in Science tarot deck. This is a relatively new deck. It was on Kickstarter last year, and just recently this summer a more mass market version has come out through the MIT Press. This is a version of the Kickstarter version that I have, so the one that's mass market available right now might be slightly different, and I'm not sure what those differences are. In the photos, everything but the little white book looks pretty much the same. So let's get looking at the cards. So I will say that this was illustrated by a comic artist who is also has a PhD in neuroscience. His name is Matteo Farinella. We're pronouncing that correctly. And the inspiration of this deck, it was one is to showcase women scientists, but also to get people who are more interested in spirituality to also be interested in science. So, so the box, it's a two-part lift-off box. They're regular tarot card size, and the box is a kind of a flat matte black color with white text and white illustrations. And, it covers about 2/3 of the box and lifts off. It's not, I think it would probably stay together okay in a bag, but I wouldn't trust it. I'd probably put it in another bag if I was going to take it with me. So the first thing I'll say, this version only comes with this little pamphlet for the little white book. So it's very basic. It has some tarot spreads at the beginning and on one side, and on the other side it goes through the meanings of the major arcana and then the suits and the numbers without going into what each number means. And you'll see that all of the minor arcana are women in science. So that's something to keep in mind. So we'll look at these when we go through the cards, but the suits are instead of water, fire, air, earth. The water is represented by nano, which is invisible fields like math and physics. Fire is represented by micro, molecular fields like chemistry and microbiology. Earth is macro, which is systemic fields like ecology and geology. And air is astro, comic fields like astronomy. So you can see it's definitely more science-based. And I'll flip through these cards, and I'll say, now, just before we start getting into it, I really like the major arcana. The minor arcana, which really is the women in science part, it's not really useful as a tarot deck. It's more useful just as a flashcard type deck. So we'll get into that. So it's really, and honestly, the author agrees with me, because in these spread suggestions it says just use the major arcana. So it's a majors deck with a whole 56 cards of pictures of women in science along with it. That's how I think of it. So the first thing you see, this is a flat black box. The backs of the cards are aggressively pink, just Barbie doll, brighter than Pepto-Bismol. It's aggressively pink. And this either appeals to you or doesn't. I'm not really a pink person, so this is, it's fine. I'm not anti-pink, but I'm not, pink's just never been my color. I'm more of a black, blue, and purple type of person, as you can probably tell. So the backs of these cards, very pink. It is the same design as the cover of the box. And they're basically reversible. It's very hard to tell what the differences are, but there are these kind of mermaid designs up in these corners. Each one of them, there's 4 different mermaids. So if you look closely, they're not entirely the same if you reverse the backs, but on a close look, they're close enough that on, doing a shuffle fan, it would be very difficult to see which side was reversed and which side was upright. So let's look at some of the cards. So the majors, which I said I really like these, they're fun comic style, and they represent scientific uh, elements. So this is a fish with legs climbing out of the water for the fool. The magician is an alchemist. The high priestess has these dice. I'm not sure. It says in the books like what scientific thing each person represents. The empress is agriculture. So a lot of it is really, if you know tarot, like the major arcana does make a lot of sense. There are some men. This is a women in science deck, but there are some men in it. Specifically, the Emperor, which is Oppenheimer with the atom bomb, and the Hierophant, which seems to be a kind of a traditional British college professor. The Lovers is Gravity, and we have Newton and Einstein, and I'm not sure who this is with the crown, but with an apple. So I'm not going to go through all 22 of them, but you can see that the majors are very much, they're scientific abstracts, and I think that as a majors only tarot deck, it works really well. The issue comes in with the heart of the deck, really, which is women in science. So you have here, this is the ace of nano, would be water. So would be the ace of cups, really. And this is invisible fields. So Ada Lovelace is a mathematician. She made some early computer stuff. I know her from computers. So they're illustrations of women doing science. And as ways to learn about 56 women who are in science from all points of history in all areas of the globe, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting way to learn more about, I haven't heard of this person, what did they do? And it is my understanding that the currently available version of the deck does have a larger book that has biographical information on each of these women. The version I have does not, because it's the older Kickstarter version from last year. But, to learn more about women in science, the minor arcana are really great. To read as tarot cards, I think they're almost less useful than pip decks. They have, almost less information than like a Tarot de Marseille type deck would have that is just pips. So I don't think I would ever read with these minors. I think that I would read with the majors as a majors only deck, but I would keep the minors in the box. If you have, I think they'd be good for if you have children from middle school or early high school who are interested in learning more about science, to have as a deck to flip through, to even use these as playing cards, because I think that would be more a useful way to do it. Keep the majors as a tarot deck, keep the minors as playing cards. So as you're playing poker or gin rummy or whatever your game is, solitary, then you can learn some of these names and what they did in science. But I think as a oracular tarot deck, they're just not very useful. Maybe if I really knew everything about these women and I was using them as a tarot deck, I could glean something from their lives, like, oh, this is how it relates to this thing over here. But as just, the deck is meant to teach you about women in science, and as that, it doesn't really work as a tarot deck for the minors. So looking at the minors, just to show you how they're depicted, we'll look at this one here. This is the nano suit. And you can see that it is represented by this little shape that it looks, I don't know, to me it looks sort of like an abstract turtle, but it's like a star shape. And so this is nano, which represents water, or it would be cups in a traditional deck. And and you can see all of the cards are, the royalty cards are people, the other cards are people, everything in the minors is a woman in science. The next suit is micro, which would be fire or wands. And you can see here, rather confusing to me actually, because this is supposed to be fire energy and it looks a lot like water droplets to me. So that would be confusing to me to have to remember that when reading. And then we have the macro, which is earth energy, and this is more representative of like a pentacle symbol, like it would be traditional, but it also looks like a sun. And so if I was just guessing what suits these were, I would guess that this one was fire because it looks like a sun. So again, I think there's some non-intuitive choices there. And you can see that the kings, it just has a K, queen is just a Q, the knights is a KN to differentiate it from the king, and the page is just a P. So it's very, there's a lot of information, in the graphics about the particular woman who depicted, but not a lot there for reading. And then the last one is the astro, which is air, and you have this little planet that looks like Saturn. So that's probably one of the easier ones of these symbols to recognize, is that the astro is the air symbol, or it would be swords. Yeah, so that is the deck. Like I said, I really like the majors. The minors, I would use them as playing cards. Just some technical notes. You can see the borders are very thin on the sides, pretty big on the top, and somewhat big on the bottom with these words. The words are not centered in the section, in the space at all. Could you trim them? You could. There's enough room on the back possibly to trim off these edges and a little bit on the bottom and the top, but you wouldn't be able to trim all the way down to this black line and just have the image there, without cutting into some of the border on the back. So if trimming decks is what you're into, it would be difficult to trim all of this space off the top of the deck and without impacting the back of the deck. The cardstock itself, again, like I said, this is the earlier Kickstarter version. So I'm not sure if the new version is going to be exactly the same, but the cardstock feels nice. We'll see how it shuffles. This size is pretty much the extent of how big I can shuffle the long way. But, I think it shuffles pretty well. Like I said, it's hard for my hands, but my hands are smaller than most adults. When it's wintertime and I'm buying gloves, I have found that 12-year-old boy is the size of glove I take, so keep that in mind. That's the size of tarot cards I can fit in my hand. And these are, they're standard tarot size, but they're just about, I'm really stretching my hands to fit these. But they shuffle nice, and they fan nice. Oops, broke it in the middle. Yeah, so I think this has a very specific audience. I think the idea behind it, more women in science, is great. Although it's described as to introduce people who are spiritual to science, most of my personal friends who are into spirituality and witchcraft and occult things are also very much already into science. There's no dichotomy. There's no split there. So that aspect of it is really unnecessary, from my perspective. But I think that there are a lot of people who do have that split, and this is a good way to kind of try to merge them. But yeah, I think what it comes down to is, if you want to learn more about women in science and also get a cool majors only tarot deck, this is a good option. I wouldn't say it is not a 78 card tarot deck. Prove me wrong. Comment on how you've used this deck and the minors read great for you. But personally, I haven't even attempted reading with it because it's just, there's not enough information there. It would really just be, me remembering I would have to be constantly doing the math in my head of, okay, what does that card in a Rider-Waite system look like? Oh, okay, that's the card I'm thinking of. It would never be me reading this deck. So, I hope that is useful for you and it's helped you make your decision about whether or not this is a good deck for you. And I do reviews every week here at the channel, so if you like this, like the video. If you want more, subscribe to the channel, and like I said, we'll do this every week. Thank you.